Hi, Mike.
Morning, Sheryl. How are you?
Good. Thank you for being here with me again today.
It is a pleasure as last time. Thank you.
Yes. So, remind our audience about what you do and how you help artists.
Sure, sure. Um, a lot of artists find it very difficult to talk about themselves and their work. Artists can produce work and talk about the technique and the products they use and the supplies they use and etc. And it's almost like talking to other artists because they all get it and that's what they want to hear. But there's people out there that want to know what your work is about and what you're about. So many artists find it difficult to talk about themselves and their work. So I simply guide artists to find their story and learn to tell it effectively and with confidence.
Yes. And after our last podcast together, I started working with you and
Right.
I really had a good experience.
Good. I'm
And
glad
I
to hear.
learned so much and I gained so much confidence. I did a retreat and I did an art workshop, and then afterwards I talked about my art and my body art to the group of women and used the tools that you gave me, and
Great.
I had people's attention. And I didn't only use it for that, I used it for another retreat as well, and it was amazing how much more captivated my audience was, and they were really like they were leaning in, like it was
Good.
amazing. It felt so good to me, and I had several women sign up and show interest. Afterwards they came up to me and said, wow, that was really amazing. And I've had good reactions in the past, but not like this. So it was really nice to get that feedback and to see, wow, this is really working.
That is so cool to hear because your experience there afterwards is so typical of so many people that go through this and really stick with it because and as much as you could talk about um, the processes you have, and you and I went over that, and I know what you do. It's don't take this the wrong way, but a lot of people could think, well, gee, X such and such a person does that, or I could do that elsewhere. But the thing is no, they can't, because it's not with you and it's not with the passion that you bring with it. Nobody can get that except from being with you. Thus, you have to do it. Every artist has to do that. And it's
Yes.
not just artists, but that's what I focus on as artists. And so if we can bring to the people the reason and the story behind what we do,
Yes.
um, everybody relates to a story and they'll put themselves in that story and they'll say, wow, I need to find a way for my story to work with what Sheryl is teaching, what Cheryl's doing. And that's what happened when those people got very excited about it, because it was no longer just a thing of, yeah, I use oil paints, or yeah, the body painting is, this is what we do. It has nothing to do with that. It has to do with the reason you're doing it. And I remember you did your final presentation with one other artist, and it was so much different than when I first met and I said, well, Sheryl, tell me about your work. It was so much different. And I thought, good, Sheryl got it. This is great. So
Yes, yes.
good
And
for
and
you.
it's still like a work in progress.
Oh, it always is.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I feel like it's always changing. And then, I have different styles of work. So it's, tweaking and um having these different stories that go with your work. But I
right.
feel it's not it's not work. It's fun to come up with ways and creative ways of coming up with, what your art means and the story behind it, instead of like dreading, like, oh my gosh, how am I going to explain this?
I
And what
know.
am I going to
I know.
say? And,
I
I'm
know.
also a pretty reserved person. So when people ask me, what do you do? I'm an artist. Oh, what kind of art? And just giving them the whatever response. Having this, it makes it more interesting and exciting, and I
it,
love
it
it.
makes it makes it more interesting for you and from you, and it it immediately gets you talking about what you want to talk about and gets the other person engaged in it immediately as well, thus it's not just a thing if I'm an artist or, oh, okay, well, my brother-in-law's 3-year-old's an artist too. You want to see what she does? And it's like, oh, God, no, not now. I mean, good for you and her, but no, that's not why I'm here. So,
Yes.
so um, it's so enlightening to see a person go through this and at the end realize that now they're speaking about what they do with a smile and confidence rather than, oh God,
Yeah.
really, really not wanting to get into it. So,
Yeah,
and I saw
absolutely.
that in you and the last day that you made your presentation. It was so apparent, so clear. And it was just, I thought, great, she's really got it. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, great. Thank you. Do you have any news stories since we spoke last about artists you have worked with? Any success stories you can share?
yes, recently, and this goes over the last couple of months. Um, there was one woman who I was working with on a private session, and um, she was very, very reserved and quiet and nervous. Um, you think you're reserved. She made you look like a NFL cheerleader based compared to what she was. She was just so quiet. And I thought, boy, we've got to get this person out of the shell and get her excited and scared to death of getting in front of people and talking. And I asked her, I said, what would you do if you were sitting in a room and someone said, oh, there's I don't know, I don't remember her name, but I do, but I'm not going to say it. But there's Joanne. Joanne, tell us about your work. What would you do? And she said, I'd be petrified. I wouldn't know what to say. I'd want to leave the room. And I said, that's the opposite of what you should do. You should be waiting for someone to ask you that. Jump up on your feet and then look at everybody in the crowd and tell your story. Doesn't have to be a long story, a couple minutes. That's all that's needed. What the story is about your work. She got to the point where after the third meeting, she said, Mike, I just came to a revelation. I said, what's that? And she said, when I talk about my work, it's not public speaking. It's speaking with friends. And I said, perfect. You got it. That's all there is to it. So from that point on, obviously she was just, I couldn't keep her from talking. And we then had to work on getting her story down to where it was short and be concise. Because remember that what you say about your work is what others will say when you're not there. So you don't want a story that's 12 chapters long. A paragraph or so is enough where someone can say, this is the work, but you need to know about this artist. So I also had a workshop where there were two people working together. They bounced off each other and they knew each other from a weekend workshop that we had done. And there was a woman and a man, and the woman that was in the workshop was again, very reserved. To meet her in public, she's a very vivacious, bubbly personality, but ask her about her work and her eyes just give you that, that 100-mile stare where she's going right through you and they glaze up and it's like, oh, there's nothing there. Huh? And as we were working, she said, well, Mike, I do a couple of different kinds of work. And I said, no, you don't. You do one kind of work. You might use different medium in the different kind. There might be oil painting, photography, and film and lights and blah, blah, blah. But you do one kind of work, and that comes from inside you, deep inside, the reason you get up in the morning and go to your studio. And it's not to do your artwork. You go in your studio to continue this story of your life and let us know what it is. And she got to the point where she told us a story of growing up. First, everybody figured this is one of those people that had just a perfect childhood. And first of all, I don't believe there is such a thing. And she did not. And I told her, I said, I just want to caution you, you do not have to tell us this story because I have a feeling it's going to get pretty tough. And she said, if I don't share it with you guys, I'll never be able to form a story out of it. And I said, okay. So she went into her story. And fortunately, the other person, extremely sensitive person, just was in tears and applauded her and said, look, we've got to work on your story. So now it's three of us working together on this, her story. We did the same thing with him. After that, she's just been dynamite, getting into residencies and shows. And because she tells her story, but it's not the story of the bad part of her life. It's the story of what she's doing because of that in
Yes.
her art. And that's what we want to know from people. And that's the idea is don't get up and give us a sob story, because if you're in a group of people and you tell us all the really nasty stuff of your life, guess what? The people in the room are going to say, well, you think you had it bad.
Yeah.
Even if yours was the worst story around. And I know, Sheryl, you've heard this, and I've seen it happen. What we want to know is, with all the stuff that went on and the bad stuff that went on in your life and how it affected you, what are you doing? What's the redemption or the light at the end of the tunnel, or whatever that phrase is that fits you? What is that, and how is it forming your art? Art takes on a completely different idea to the viewer, to the let's say the non-art educated viewer. It's a completely different piece of work when you tell the effect of your story and the effect that it has on your art, and that the art has on you. So
Yes.
that is what I try and get when I work with people. And as a group, that's what we try and resolve, is using that story, not telling the sob story to everybody, telling the redemption story. That makes sense?
Right. You don't want people to leave depressed. You want them to leave, excuse me, inspired.
Right.
That's the goal.
Inspired and enlightened
Enlightened. Yeah.
and very happy and relieved that okay, yeah, my story's pretty nasty, but you know what? So is everyone else's.
Yeah.
But I think there's a way to get around this, or get through this, not around it. You get through this, because quite frankly, that's why I would say well over 99% of the artists do art, do work like this, whatever the like this is. I mean, do what we call art. And everybody has their own art. Everybody has their own art form. And it's generally based on the stories that brought us to where we are today.
Yes.
And that's what I try and get people to do, is just find that, be comfortable with it. And now let's work on the redemption part of it, and the enlightened, and the light at the end of the tunnel, and the happiness of why you do your work. And that's what comes through. There was, if I have time.
Yeah. Go ahead.
There was one other person who, she had done a weekend workshop. She pretty much got the idea. I didn't have much time with her in these weekend workshops. And I spoke with her a few times, and about 2 months later, she wrote and said, Mike, I've got a deadline in a month. I'm being asked to curate a show, but it's competitive. There's 18 other people, and I will be presenting to the board. She said, I am scared to death doing this. Can you get me ready? And I said, yeah, no problem. So we worked on, since she was going to be curating the show and her art was going to be in it, I said, okay, don't tell me so much about your work now. Tell me about your idea of this show. What will you be presenting to us if we walk in that gallery? And how will you describe all the work in here, how it all fits together and what it all means? We worked on that. And then I said, how are you at standing in front of these 18 board members who are all collectors and are going to be judging you, and you're going to be standing there alone in front of them? She says, I'm scared to death. So we worked on that. There's ways to work through that. And these aren't magical tricks or manipulation or anything like that. It's just ways to feel comfortable with talking to people. And after that, she was very, very comfortable with it. She called me a week later, says, I got the gig. She said, I got the show. I'll be presenting the show. And I said, I just want you to know something, that it was your idea that they were in love with. And all you and I did is got you to the place where you're comfortable presenting it. So you got that show on your own. I just helped you get to the point where you could be yourself when you did that, so you could curate that show. And she was just beyond herself. She got the job, or the curation. She's doing the show, and it's a dynamite show. She showed me the work, and it's just unbelievable. So these are the kind of things that, and there's many, many more, but this is very, very typical. These are not 1 out of 50 or something like that. It's probably, I would say, close to 100% of the people have a success story of what came out of it once they got to the point of finding their story and learning how to tell it with confidence.
I
So,
believe it.
and I think you get that because you certainly did it yourself. So
Yeah, no, I believe it. And I just love listening to these success stories.
good.
I feel like a lot of artists need that. They need that to hear that and
Yep.
feel more encouraged. And it's cool that they can just come to you and say, "Hey, I need help with this,"
Right.
and they
Right.
could, book a session with you, and then you help them and you tweak things, and then there they go into the world.
Yeah.
And yeah,
Yeah, it is good. It's very fulfilling for me, and especially when I see them go out and their true self comes out and does what they want to do and what they feel they need to do. So that's so satisfying. So
I'm sure. What do you say to artists when they get discouraged when they're going through the process?
there's a couple of sources of discouragement, and we briefly talked about them a little. One of them is scared to death to get in front of people because they look at it as public speaking, and the other is I don't know my story. And the answer to the second is yes, you do.
Mm.
You just have to find it yourself, and that's where I guide them to go deep inside and find their story. It might take a while. This is not something we'll do in one session and they say, oh yeah, this is what it is. Okay, now I'm good. No, this is what and you know well about this, and I saw you do it where we would discuss this and a week later you would say, Mike, I thought about this and here's what I came up with and and it's like, it's all it took is for you to, it's like planting a seed and letting it grow a little bit. And you nurtured that seed and realized, okay, this is the real reason I'm doing this. And again, you don't have to get into that with everybody. It's just finding the reason and then be comfortable with how you say it. And I think I shared it with you. I did a video. I didn't do the video. It was done when I was speaking at the Moth, which is, a gathering of 300 people, and you tell a story and they give you a time limit. And I did one about my life, but I made it very open, very welcoming for everybody. It wasn't rejecting anybody, and there was nothing in there about, yeah, well, my life was worse than yours. It was just like the rest of you. Things got pretty nasty when I was a kid. And here's what I'm doing because of it, not in spite of it, but because of it. Mm-hmm. And so there's a way to tell the story without bringing people down. As you mentioned a moment ago, it's getting them to be involved in it and say, yeah, my life was pretty bad, but you know what? I'm doing okay. Now that's where you're getting to the first step where you can say, you're doing okay. Why are you doing okay? What are you doing? And if they say, well, I just take drugs all day, it's like, oh, no, we're on the wrong path here. We gotta work on something else. Yeah. The other thing is the scared to death about getting in front of people and do public speaking. And I shared a story of a person I worked with back when I was doing this for financial professionals. And it's just a way of thinking about being in front of a group of people. And I'll give everybody a little hint right here, if we have a quick second, is when you're in a gallery and you're going to talk about your work or any kind of gathering, these are not strangers. These people came to see you, and they came to see you and your work. They didn't come to say, oh, okay, guess who's talking today? Let's go watch her fail. Let's see if we can make her really flub this thing up and fail. That's not why people are there. They're there to get inspired about your work. So right there, they're friends.
Yeah.
So now there's a couple other ways to do this, and I go through that in a workshop and work on it. But it's like talking to your friends, not doing public speaking to a room of 300 strangers like I did at that Moth deal. But I've been doing that for so long, I'm used to it. It still scares the heck out of me, but it's okay. I work through it. But it's talking to your friends, not public speaking and addressing a group of strangers. And there's a couple exercises we do to get you to that point where it really works. And that's where, even if I work with someone solo like you and I did, I recommend that let's bring on someone else for you guys to give your stories to back and forth, your final story, which you did.
Yes.
And it was so cool because the two of you would do it and you say, wait, I'm going to do it again, but I got to make a little change. And I made notes on the changes both of you made. And by the time you did it the third time, and by the way, you weren't nervous about doing it because you and she both said, oh, okay, I want to do mine again now. And it's like, fine, I got all day, let's go.
Yeah.
And your final presentation was just, my God, this is unbelievable. And it's fully believable because you did it. It's coming from you. So
Yeah.
that's what's so enjoyable about doing these one-on-ones or the workshops. And I highly recommend that. A lot of people want to do it on their own because they know they're going to get into the story. They don't want to share that. And that's fine. I understand. If you're more comfortable by yourself, do it. But I would ask that let's consider on the final meeting, let's pair you up with someone else. And even if it's someone you don't know, which actually works extremely well, that helps you get over those jitters. And it really, really makes a more effective, confident story.
I agree. I really liked that part.
Good.
And I got
It
good
was obvious.
feedback.
Good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Good.
So I'm sure you deal with a lot of artists who are reserved or shy. I guess you answered that, how you get them out of their shell by telling them that, you know, you're talking to a friend. I think it's perspective. Like you gave them a mind, like shift their mind on what they're doing.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. It's a different way of looking at it because so many people say if you're called upon at a gallery, it's public speaking, and that's one of the two main fears that people have. It's like, well, no, it's not. And even if it was, so what? What's the matter with that? You're getting in front of your friends. This isn't. Again, you're not addressing 300 strangers that want to be entertained. Everybody wants to be entertained, but entertaining doesn't mean you make them laugh all day long. It means that they walk out of there fulfilled and knowing something that they didn't know before and glad they were there. That's entertained. Part of being entertained. That's a big part of it.
So this is a comment from an artist and my friend Ruby Vartan, who worked with you, and she introduced us, and I'm so happy she did. So this is what she said. Michael O'Connor has influenced me with his ability to make me understand why my art looks the way it does. He has helped me realize the reason why I create in a certain way, including my technique of art making. He made me go deep into my mind and pull out the why of my works. How important is it to know our why? I always hear that, know your why, know your why. So tell us, like, why is that important to know your why?
Okay, good. What is the reason for that? There's a couple of things about why, and I know you hear it all the time. It's on commercials now. What's your why? And this is the why. And almost to the point of, oh God, if I hear that again, I'm going to strangle somebody. But the point is it's not just a moniker, a sales moniker, a training thing. I remember working with financial advisors. We went over these trainings 15, 20 years ago on the why, the reason you are doing what you're doing. And there's a couple of things about that though. Probably the most important thing to remember right off the bat, and it's very easy to remember this, is people do not buy what you do, they buy why you do it.
Yes.
And by buy, one of the first things I ask people in the group is, what is your definition of a sale? And I don't mean that white thing on front of a boat. It's selling something. What is a sale? And everybody says, oh, it's when you get money for your work. And I said, no, that's the result of a sale. A sale is getting your listener to feel about what you do the same as you do. And the only reason to get me to feel about what you do the way you do is tell me why you do it. Don't tell me what you're doing, because there's a lot of people that do what you do. And don't tell me how you do it, because everybody who paints does it. That everyone has a little bit different tweak, but Okay, so you're a painter. Why are you better than the one sitting next to you that's a painter also? I'm not talking to you directly, Sheryl.
Yes, yes.
What people are thinking when you present yourself as a this or that or that. Don't label yourself and say I'm an artist, I'm a photographer, I'm a painter, I'm this. Um, I would suggest that you start off by, if someone says, "What do you do?" Start off with telling them why you do what you do, and then say what you do. Now, I said it at the beginning of the presentation. I'll say it again real quickly. Many artists find it difficult to talk about themselves and their work. I guide artists to find their story and learn to tell it effectively. I gave you the reason why I do what I do. A lot of people would say, "Well, Mike, you're an artist coach." I never said I'm a coach. There's no label on there. If you want to call me a coach, that's up to you. I guide artists to find their story, learn to tell it effectively. And there's a reason for that. And the reason is because, uh, as you well know, Sheryl, that so many artists have a hard time with that and don't know why they do it. They don't know why they're doing what they're doing.
Yes.
They deep down inside you do, but they can't explain it. So give us the reason why you do what you do. And part of that is your story. A lot of people call that the elevator pitch. Okay, that's what it is. I call it an initial presentation. I've seen it happen where people sitting on a plane, an artist friend of mine did that. She sat on a plane and someone looked at it. This was right after going through our workshop. And they said, "What do you do?" And she was about to go through her regular thing. "Well, I'm a painter and I use this and that and that." And she said, "Nope, that's not what Mike said." She gave the reason she does what she does and then what she does. And to make a long story short, this was 4 years ago. The guy still purchased her work online. He doesn't live in the same state even. He's in Texas, she's in Los Angeles. And that's not a state, it's California. But he still buys her work online, follows her, and keeps in touch with her. And I asked her, I said, "Do you think that would have happened that way had you not done this by saying why first?" And she said, "Mike, I don't know. It's impossible to say. I didn't want to take a chance though. So I did it and it worked. I'm doing it from now on." So the reason I think that people, the why is so important is because that's what people buy. And by buy, I mean, that's what they fall in love with. That's what they attach themselves to, not your painting or your workshop or your print or your whatever. It's the reason, it's the story. Because I've seen people say, "Well, I'm a sculptor. I do sculpting," and they say, I've heard the response, "I don't have any room for my house for sculptures." But if someone tells them why they do what they do and then what they do, the response turns there from, "I don't have any room in my house from sculptures because I have little kids." It's like, I got a couple of places where a sculpture would look really great.
Yeah.
It's now, how do I become part of this story? Stories are magical. You know it, Sheryl. You've read them to your kids. You've had them read to you. Everyone becomes a part of a story. Give your listener and your viewer the opportunity to be part of a fantastic story, because everybody's is.
Yes.
And it's just how you tell it.
I remember going to an art fair, and there was an artist I saw, she had really beautiful, her work was beautiful. And I asked her, "What is the story behind your work?" And this was before any of this, I was intrigued and I wanted to know. And she said, "Well, what do you think?" And I was so turned off by it. I didn't realize why. And now I get it after all this work and working with you as well. Like, oh, she didn't have her story. And that's what we're captivated by, not just because then after she said that, it just looked like another art piece to me.
Exactly. And what could be going in your mind is, well, what I think is, I don't like it. It's pretty ugly. And a lot of times the artist will say, "Well, that's fine. Then you're not the one to buy this." But if your sales are so high, if that's what your intent is, to sell your work, and your sales are so high that you can turn people away, great, good for you.
Yeah.
If you're not selling and you don't care to sell, but you want as many people to enjoy your work as possible, that it's the same thing. People buy why you do it, not what you do. And that's been proven in business for years and years. And as much as I know a lot of artists like to shy away from the business because art is art. There's still a business to it. There are people who purchase art who have no formal art training or education. And they're probably in business. They might own a company or work for a company. They're used to business and they want to know what they're buying. And it's the story of it.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
when you watch almost any good commercial, they will start off, if you keep your eye on it, they will start off with the reason you should have this medicine or this car or this or this, that. And then they'll tell you what it is. You're
Yeah.
buying the reason.
Do you have any words of wisdom to end our podcast?
Sure. I would tell everybody to just remember this. What you say about your work is what others will say when you're not there. If you say a quick, engaging story about your work, that's what the salesperson or the museum director or the art consultant or somebody else will say. And I've seen it happen because before I got 100% into the art world, I was working with financial advisors, and I would be at their office parties or their homes or something, and they would buy a piece of work, and the most successful people and the artists who sell a lot of work, the person who had the work, someone else would come into the living room and say, "Hey, what's that?" And they would say the story of the artist and the work. They wouldn't say it's an oil painting. They would say, "Oh, I gotta tell you about this artist." 4 or 5 sentences about the artist and what the work is. And what goes through the other person's head is, now with financial advisors, it's a little different. They'll say, "Oh, I got to get one of those, but it's got to be bigger than yours." But what most people will think is, "Oh, I'd love to find out about this artist and get this." And they'll go home and look up the artist and find out more about the story. So if nothing else, the most important thing you can do is remember that what you say is what others will say when you're not there. If you say nothing, nothing will be said. If you said it's an oil painting on a 3x5 wooden panel that I had made in South Korea, that's what's going to be said. And it's like, who cares? Why do I care where the panel was made? Is there something about that? Is that better than the art? Maybe I should just go buy a panel from South Korea. I just made that up. So, but you get the idea. Is make sure whatever you say. If you're in a gallery, talk to the gallery director and say, "I'd like to talk to your sales staff about my work." They will love it. I guarantee you, because I have gallery owners that ask me to come and talk to their staff about how to tell the story.
It's
And
interesting. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, one of them asked me to come in and talk to her artists. And I knew the reason why, but I asked her, I said, "Why would you want me to do that?" And she said, "Because my artists are my worst salespeople." So, they're the best when it comes to their art, but talking about it, forget it. And when you go to openings, when people go to openings, Sheryl, and you're showing your work, we want to go up and hear from you what's going on, and not get an art lesson.
Yeah.
The art lesson is for other artists who are there. You can do that later. You can run a workshop on how to stretch a canvas or whatever. But what we want to know at an art opening is, Sheryl, what was it that created these paintings? Or what are you doing in your body painting? What's the idea of that? And why is it temporary? And your answers are beautiful to that. So that's the most important thing, is make sure that you say something that I can repeat after I've seen your work.
Right. What I was going to say is that I was asking some of my collectors why they buy my work. I was doing some market research, and
Good.
one of them said, it's because of a short description you had under the piece, which described the yin and yang of your work. Because I used to incorporate like salt and sugar in my work, and I explained why. And she loved that, and she could relate to it because of the ups and downs in her own life and all of our lives, right? And she's like, every time I see it, I'm reminded of that, and it brings me clarity and calm and peace. And so it was nice to hear that, and it was validating too, because sometimes you think, well, should you just let people figure it out on their own? Because everyone has a different perspective or, interpretation of your art. But I do feel it's like we're talking about,
That's
it's
right.
important to people to know
That's
your
exact-
story.
That's precisely right. If you leave it up to people, you're not going to want to hear most of the responses.
Yeah.
So that's
Well,
perfect.
tell us
Well done.
where people can find you, and I'm going to put your information in the show notes as well.
Okay. The easiest way is through my website. It's been completely redone and it's very easy to get through now. And it's Fine Art of Storytelling. It's all one word.com. That's it. And in there is my Instagram and Facebook. I haven't been posting to either a lot lately because I'm putting together the workbooks for the workshop, and I have a couple of in-person presentations that I'm getting ready to do. So, but I will be posting some. I'm going to give a kind of like a mini lesson on Instagram coming up. So if you go to the website, it'll have all the addresses and all the information. Get a hold of me, and I answer the emails personally. Every day I look through there and answer them personally. So if anybody has any questions, don't hesitate to contact me. I can talk to you about what we do, what you would do if you work with me, and it could be individually, in a group with 2, with 3 people, some friends of yours, whatever. I'm extremely flexible with that. So but that's the best. fineartofstorytelling.com.
Thank you, Mike, for being here today. It was such a pleasure.
My pleasure. Thanks, Sheryl.